Welcome to Explorer Classroom. My name is Celeste Harrison, and I'm so glad you guys are here joining us today. At National Geographic, we believe in the power of exploration, wonder, and storytelling to change our world for the better. This Explorer Classroom YouTube show connects students from all around the world with our National Geographic explorers for short lessons and plenty of time for all of your questions. Today, our explorer is Dr. Keneiloe Molopyane. Keneiloe is an archaeologist and biological anthropologist, which means that she learns a lot about how communities of people in the distant past lives. She did that by digging up and investigating bones and items. So today we're going to be talking about fossils. We're talking about ancient human relatives. We're talking about cave excavations. It is going to be a good day here on Explorer Classroom. But before we get into the lesson, we've got some shout outs to give. Our shout outs for the episode are going to Adele, Ashwatha, Burnham Elementary, the Don Tyson School of Innovation, E-Academy Virtual, Fernandez Kids, Fort Collins, Grace, Kunduri, Locke Middle School, McEwen, Manning students, Matthews students, Neebsco Elementary, Newmark School, the Prajonsky family, PS 274 Kaskisio, the Santoro family, the Schultzes, Siddharth, the Tran family, Upani students, and Williams School. And the last shout out that I have this morning is actually for our explorer, Keneiloe. Just like many of you out there with interrupted school years, her studies were also disrupted by COVID. She earned a PhD way back in the pandemic, and she finally gets to walk in a graduation ceremony this week. So everybody send your congratulations, maybe give her some spirit fingers. The last shout out's for you, Dr. Malanape. Congratulations, Keneiloe. Quick reminder for everyone, it's nearly winter break here in the Northern Hemisphere. So like many of our students, Explorer Classroom will be taking a couple of weeks off really soon here. I bet you're excited for the break. We are too. Today is actually our last day of events for 2021, and our 2022 events pick back up in the middle of January. We can't wait to see you then. We're thrilled to have you all joining us. That's plenty of talking from me. Let's get this Explorer Classroom event started. It's time for me to turn it over to Keneiloe to start sharing all about exploring history through bones. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Les. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Keneiloe Molopyane. And yeah, tomorrow is the last day of school for me, ever, because I'll be graduating with my PhD. So yay, finally, I get to graduate. But, enough about me graduating, Let's get on with today's lesson. If you just give me a minute and I will share my screen. Cool. Awesome. So my presentation to you guys is all about ancient human ancestors, right? And as Celeste said, that I am an archaeologist and biological anthropologist. So what that means is I'm an ancient bone detective. And not just that, I'm also a cartoon superhero, actually. So you can see here on this cartoon, on this presentation here, I've been turned into a superhero that is meant to inspire young children younger than yourselves and about your same age to go into archaeology and biological anthropology. So with that out of the way, let's get on to today's lessons, which is all about human ancestors. All right, now when we talk about human beings being on the earth, right, we like to think that we have been the only people that have lived throughout forever, since forever. But the truth is our species as modern humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, have only been around for about 200,000 years. And that in comparison is almost like a baby in comparison to other fossils that have been around for millennia, almost 6 million years ago. So in this image here, we have what I found on the internet to be the progression of man. And this is the image that was portrayed to me when I was a kid, about your age, learning about human evolution. And we see that you start off with what looks like to be a bit of a chimpanzee kind of creature, and it sort of evolves into modern man. And this was the ideas that scientists had at the time, that this is how human beings sort of evolve through time. But we know that this is not correct, right? And this image is very controversial and still is. simply because it sort of implies that we came from monkeys. And we know that that is not true. We know that through studies that have been conducted over the years, it's more complicated than that, right? We haven't been the only humans around in time, but we're also not from monkeys. We actually have a common ancestor. And from this common ancestor came about at least 15 to 20 ancient humans that sprang up over a period of 6 million years. And it is these 15 to 20 individuals or species that us biological anthropologists like to explore, find, and study so that they can tell us more about ourselves and how we have developed and become who we are as a modern species. So this is the current understanding of how human evolution has worked. But it's not a perfect depiction of what it is, but it's good enough in comparison to what we had before, which is the march of progression. Now, I'm not sure if this was mentioned before, but I'm South African. I'm from South Africa, the cradle of humankind. So for you guys, it's early in the morning, and for me, it's about 5 o'clock in the evening. So there's a bit of a time difference right there. But what I do want to do tonight or this morning for you guys is to take you through some of the human ancestors, the fossils that we do have in South Africa, that have reached almost celebrity status and have added or contributed to our understanding of being human. In the first place that I do want to take you to, which is also a part of the Cradle of Humankind. So the Cradle of Humankind here I've outlined in green is an area which is the most concentrated in human fossils. And the first place that I'm going to take you is called Taung, which is right here, and that's in the northwest. And it's also considered to being the cradle of humankind because in 1924, a huge discovery was made. And that is the discovery of a fossil, which would be called Australopithecus africanus, or classed as Australopithecus africanus. This guy right here, and his name is the Taung child, right? So Taung child was discovered in 1924 by Professor Raymond Dart, when miners were working in a quarry in the northwest, and they came across this fossil, and so they sent it over to him to figure out what it is or what it could mean. Now, in 1924, the early 1920s, the general thought was that humanities or human originated in Europe, and they had no connections to Africa. And now with this discovery of the Taung child being at least 3 million years old, it definitely showed that humanity actually had its roots in Africa, especially Southern Africa. And this was one of the key fossils that broke the internet before the internet was a thing, showcasing that actually Africa had more to add to the world than just being a backward country. This is actually where you're all from. So if we stick to looking at the cradle of humankind and Australopithecines, I'm going to take you from Taung to the cradle of humankind in Gauteng. And I have that illustrated here on the map. And we are going to focus specifically within the cradle of humankind on Sterkfontein Caves. Now, I used to be the curator of the Sterkfontein Caves Museum before I moved on to becoming a researcher. But this highlighted area that I've got in green is actually the largest concentration of fossils in a given area in the entire world. I might just add that. And from within this small area, we're going to look at Sterkfontein Caves. So you remember we have the Taung child in 1924. 1947, Dr. Robert Broom comes across a very special specimen called Mrs. Pless, who's also an Australopithecus africanus, and is basically the adult version of the Taung child. Now, remember, only about 20 years have lapsed in this time, and I'm sure scientists have been arguing that, of course, no possible human came from Africa. We didn't find our origins there. And then Mrs. Pless, Australopithecus africanus, comes into play as the adult version of the totem child. Again, that solidifies that our origins are actually from this continent. So take a seat, you know, just putting that out there. So that was in 1947. Then a couple of years go by, and another darling fossil comes across, and that is that of Littlefoot. Now, when Littlefoot was announced, I think I was still in school. This must have been 1997 or so, by Professor Ron Clark and his assistants. And they had just discovered the foot bones and I think a partial skull of Littlefoot, again within the Sterkfontein Caves. So that sort of like piqued my interest a little bit. But to be honest, I wasn't really into fossils when I was in school. I was more into like the adventures and finding treasure, not knowing that Littlefoot actually is a national treasure, but you know, whatever. It took about 20 years to excavate a Littlefoot from her tomb. She was encased in breccia, and for what we know is that she's the most complete skeleton of an Australopithecus africanus. And we can learn so much from her. We see that she has very long arms and skinny fingers, which might indicate that she also lived and moved around the terrain through trees. So she had great swinging motion in her arms. But also, how did she land up in the cave, right? And that's, we sort of hypothesize that she landed up, like most other fossils in the cradle of humankind, falling to her death in a death trap. So that's a little hole, a cave opening that must have been covered up by trees and bushes, and a little Australopithecus or hominin would come across, swing by, and lose their footing, not watch where they're going, and then plummet to their death into the cave, waiting for the day that we uncover them and the secrets that they have to share with us about their humanity. And that's just Sterkfontein Caves. If any of you guys are interested, we do have a website called the mapping.co.za, where you can learn about a lot of the fossils from the cradle of humankind. So if we move away from Sterkfontein and we go to another cave site, still within the cradle of humankind, and that is Australopithecus sediba, discovered in 2008 by a young 8-year-old Matthew Berger, who was out in the field with his dad, Lee Berger, and by accident, total accident, Matthew stumbled across a rock, and in that rock was a bone sticking out of it. And the famous words were, "Dad, I found a fossil." And from those words came the greatest discovery of 2008 to 2010, and that is Australopithecus sediba. So I've got him here, a cast of him here. And he's also nicknamed Karabo. And Karabo in Setswana, which is one of the local languages that we speak here in South Africa, means the answer. And what that sort of symbolizes that Australopithecus sediba dates to about 1.8 million years. So we're getting closer and closer to our more modern humans, who are about the 200,000 year mark. And so we have this new creature on our landscape who looks very different from Australopithecus africanus. They're a bit taller, more slender than Australopithecus africanus. And we can see two fossil specimens here. So this is MH1, aka Karabo, which is the holotype, the original fossil that was found. And next to him is MH2, which we presume to be a female based on her hips, the size of her hips. And again, I want you to look at the length and the size of her arms and her hand. I think I've got a hand right here. It is skinny and curved, right? Now I've got long skinny fingers, but this is quite extreme if I put it up that way. And again, that tells us that these creatures must have been moving around the terrain through the trees or having a great climbing ability, because they had the anatomy for it, even though we as modern humans have that, but these guys were very specialized to it. And then we take a look at Karabo's legs, his femurs, and the way that they're angled, it shows that the femur is sort of angling towards the knees. So the legs are coming towards the knees. And the spine is very straight. So that tells us that this individual must have walked upright. So again, we're becoming more bipedal, and that's becoming more and more human. Also the brain size, our brain capacity is also quite increasing, which is another modern human capacity or characteristic. And this is just one of the journeys that we went through as human beings. So that's Australopithecus sediba. And then we have Homo naledi. Homo naledi was discovered in about 2015. Well, the announcement was made in 2015. Another fossil that broke the internet well, the internet was a thing back then in 2015, but this was a major discovery. I'm gonna try to see if I can grab my skull of Naledi. Here we are. So I have a cast skull of Homo naledi. Like I said, discovered in 2015 by pure accident by two cavers who went exploring in a cave, and they stumbled across a cavern filled with bones all over. And they went up to Professor Lee Berger. They're like, hey, maybe this is interesting. Take a look. They showed him some pictures. And he was just like, oh my goodness, you have just made the biggest discovery of the century. And so this huge expedition funded by National Geographic occurred in 2015 to uncover what has been the largest collection of fossil remains within a single isolated cave. I think there are about 1,500 bone fragments that were collected in 2015. And that's the largest collection that anyone has ever collected from a fossil site ever. And this totals to about 15 individuals, I should think, telling the story of this new species of human. Dates to about 350 to 250, 100 years old. So that, again, that's becoming closer and closer to our modern human date of 200,000 years old. And I've had the pleasure of being in the Rising Star Cave system where Homo naledi was discovered. And I have dug up some of these bones, and I must say it is quite a privilege and an exciting adventure to get to dig up these ancient ancestors, because it's quite a trail to work, I must say. And I'm very happy to explain that to you if you find that very interesting. But quite recently, maybe a couple of months ago, still with the Homo naledi discovery, was another skull fossil that was discovered, and this is called Little Leti. And Leti is short for Litemile, who is, so Litemile in Sesotho or Setswana means the lost one. And she is a juvenile, so a child version of Homo naledi, right here. And she was found not too far away from the Naledi chamber where the main fossils of Homo naledi were discovered, beyond what is known as the chaos chamber. And her discovery is actually quite remarkable in that we don't get a lot of juvenile bones in the paleoarchaeological record, because they're so rare and so delicate, so you hardly ever find them. So what I've actually shown you today are two juveniles from South Africa that speak to the human journey, and that is the Taung child and Little Leti over here. I don't think any other country in the world has that to boast about, and we do. Now, what I've just shared with you is just the tip of the iceberg of the fossils from the cradle of humankind. I think I've only taken you to about 2 to 3 fossil sites, whereas the cradle of humankind is actually comprised of, officially, that we have released at least 15 fossil sites, right? And all these 15 fossil sites have yielded some ancient humans and some animal remains that again speaks to the ancient world and how we have developed, and could possibly answer questions of, if we had at least 20 to 15 cousins as part of these human species, what happened to them? And it's by studying all these sites that we can figure out, did they die out? Was it a question of climate and food challenges, or something else? And this is the great thing about paleoanthropology, is that you ask all these questions, and then you try to answer them to put the puzzle pieces back together. And so I said that officially there's about 15 fossil sites, but in reality there's a whole lot more than that, just waiting to be discovered. So what you're looking at here is a map of the cradle of humankind, and this huge cluster over here is within that green area, the green box that I showed you. And as you can see, it is just clustered with lots and lots of fossil sites, just waiting to be discovered and scientifically analyzed. One of my new sites, Gladysville, is within this cluster, and we're hoping that we're going to find a whole lot more fossils that tell the story of our ancient human ancestors and that build to our human family tree. And I think that's it for me, and I'm very looking forward to any questions that you guys might have, and for the day that you guys can join me in the field, making whole new discoveries. Oh, before I leave, and this is probably one of the most important things for you guys to take away, is the reason why paleoanthropologists do what we do. And again, it's mostly because we want to understand ourselves. So we went through the whole progression of man in the braided stream or the family tree. But what is coming out recently with all our research and studies is that it's actually a bit more complicated than we think. Perhaps all these ancient human ancestors that we're finding in the record might not have lived in isolation or at different times, but might have lived at the same time, probably in the same area, and bumped into each other. And maybe some interbreeding went into there that sort of formed who we are today. And these are some of the questions that we need to investigate and hopefully find those answers in the archaeological record. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Amazing. And for our last question, do you have any general advice for all the young people out there watching today or future explorers?
Ooh, the best advice that I can give you, and it's sort of a motto that I had when I was about your age, is always stay inquisitive, keep exploring, and ask lots and lots of questions. That will take you very far in life, and never, ever, ever give up, no matter what anybody says, and cartoons are definitely good for you.
I love it. Amazing. Huge thank you to all of you out there. First, to Keneiloe for doing this amazing work and for hanging out with us to share it. Second, to the teachers and families out there who make cool stuff like this happen for your kids. Thank you so much. And most of all, to the students who send in such brilliant and inspiring questions. Thank you for your curiosity and for sharing your time with us. I hope to see you at many of our events next year. A reminder, this is our last day of events until 2022. We'll pick right back up after Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in the US. Have an awesome rest of your day. Have an awesome holiday season. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll see